Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah. Dear students, we are going to start our last part in our semester, which is the enrichment. Now, the enrichment basically is just to revise and review the ideas that we have in the book and just to recall the things that we studied throughout the semester. So we're going to start. Basically, we do know that we have our 4 units as we mentioned before. Now, what did we study in these units? There are mixed lessons between, we have here grammar for meaning and function. We had our reading lessons. We had the listen and discuss. We had the writing. We had vocabulary in many parts of these units. Now we're going to just revise and see what we have. First of all, we have unit 1, which is 2 is better than 1. What did we take? We have here in 2 is better than 1. The idea was about teamwork in general. So in unit 1, we studied the difficulties that students face when they are on their own. When did we study this part? If we recall that we took it in the conversation part here, and we had the discussion between the 2 young men here who are Adnan and Badr, who teamed up to help each other while studying in New York. Now, while we talked about Badr and Adnan, if you recall that we had studied the negotiating phrases or how to have a kind of negotiation between 2 people. Also, we had different, of course, these are the phrases we have here. For example, how about if I and you? I think it would be fair if. I'm sure we can work this out. Okay, I'll agree to if you will. And would you be willing to do something if I do something else? Now, note that we are just revising together, and I want you to refresh your memories to what we have studied throughout the unit. Now, what else did we study in the conversation? We had the real talk. Now, the real talk, we can see that on the same wavelength. Do you remember what did we say about the meaning? Now, we have here the first one is going to be to think about something. And when we say that no sweat here actually means no problem. And if something is not your cup of tea, this is actually a polite way to say that you do not like something. Moving on with our unit, we talked about, if you recall in the reading, about these different animals. Now, what did they have in common, or what can we say about them? Now, we have here the idea of animal partners, and we have here about symbiotic teams that have different benefits, and they share different things to cover for each other's deficiencies. Now, back to the human world. Think about your relationship with a good friend and what you can offer each other. Do you remember when we took this part here? We can just recall here that actually this is the writing lesson. Now, we wrote about it, and we also asked the question, do you think it is necessary for people to share the same characteristics? Now, I want you just to recall the meaning of the word characteristic here and how these characteristics, are they important or not for people to get along with each other? Now, we have here the Venn diagram. Now, do you remember the grandparents here? We use the diagram to write a descriptive essay, to describe a descriptive essay about people's qualities or characteristics. Now, moving on to the second unit. What is the second unit about? Now, we can say that we have here, of course, the idea about influential people here. And in the second unit, we have here Ahmed and Ibrahim. Ahmed and Ibrahim here, we said that Ahmed's parents have given him 30,000 for graduation. Now, what type of discussion did they have here, or the conversation between them? Now, as we mentioned before that there is negotiation in Unit 1, we do have discussion in Unit 2, and these discussing options are, we can say, at the same time, but then again, I could always. On the other hand, the alternative would be, and what would you think about? So these are different phrases and also a question here that we can use for discussion. Also in the conversation, we took different phrases or expressions that are used as real talk. Now, for example, how is he driving people crazy? Now, what did we say? What is the meaning of driving people crazy? We also had the question, would you mind getting that amount of cash? Just remember, what did we say? Would you mind? When do you ask this question? And we have a very simple word, which is cash. Moving on, we have also, he goes around in circles. Now, do you remember what does this mean? Now, going around in circle, it means that he is just thinking about something on and he cannot decide. And also we had the expression, he gets cold feet. Now, does this actually mean that he is scared or he has cold feet, or does it mean something else? Now, just recall the meanings of these different expressions, leading us to the last question here we have here. Would you put your money aside for a rainy day? Now, this was the last question that we asked in the conversation lesson in Unit 2. Moving on to our reading, if you can recall that we studied about Sheikh Sulaiman al-Rajhi, who was one of the influential people who were mentioned in the book. And after we had finished the reading part, we were asked also to write a descriptive essay about people's qualities or characteristics, but we have here about a person's life. After that, we have in Unit 3, we had the topic of what will they think of next. Now, if you remember that we talked about futuristic ideas and predictions that were made in the past about the future. Now, also to revise what we had in the conversation lesson, we had these two characters, if you can recall them. We had Edward and his grandmother. Now, what did he try to do? So just recall that we had negotiation, we had discussion, and here Edward was trying to persuade his grandmother. Now, do you remember when she was reading, or actually she was lugging around a book, and he was persuading her to try electronic books or e-books? Now, what were the phrases that we used? We have here, I'm sure if you just give it a try, you'll find out that. Another one, to look at it this way. One of the advantages is, one reason you should consider. We have here, trust me on this, and what's great about this is. So these are different phrases that we applied throughout our lesson to try to persuade someone else. Now, here we can see that there are different real talk phrases. So he wants her to ditch the book that she has been lugging around all weekend. Now, just recall these pictures and which one means ditch and which one means lugging. We have also studied, he wants her to check out ebook readers and go with the flow. So when we say that people go with the flow, now note that this is also an idiom, like the idioms that we studied in the expansion. Now she thinks that it is just a lot of hoopla. Remember the meaning of hoopla. Now, was she convinced at the end or not? Also, one of the interesting topics that we talked about in Unit 3 was about space tourism in the reading lesson. Moving on after the reading, we also had the idea of the Vision 2030. Now, what did we discuss? Now, if you recall in the writing lesson, we were asked also to write a descriptive essay about people's qualities or characteristics. We have your descriptive essay about persons. Moving on to the fourth unit, Unit 4, we had the interesting topic, which is the world of TV. Now, in the world of TV, we also had the conversation. Now, if you recall that we were talking about sports or watching sports and how people sometimes they enjoy watching sports together or alone. Now, after that, we had the interesting conversation about between Fahad and Adil. Now, here the conversation was about a basketball game that they were watching together. And here, from these two signs, we reached to the fourth way to have a conversation. So just to recall that we had negotiation, we had discussion, we had persuading, and we come to the fourth part, which is agreeing and disagreeing. Now we have here agreeing and disagreeing. There are different ways to agree or disagree, as you can see in the table. We did mention the phrases that are used for agreeing and also the other phrases that are used for disagreeing, and we applied them within our conversations. We also had the real talk phrases here. Now you can see that we had the exercise that we did together. We have here just, hard to swallow, a dime a dozen, and doze off, which we matched with the different meanings that we have in the book and we applied in the conversations. The reading part was about the formula behind detective stories on TV. Now, there was a interesting discussion about detective stories, and in which we were introduced to the idea about formulas. Now, there are different formulas. We said, of course, we can say that a formula is a mixture of something together, and we talked about the different ideas or formulas that are in the detective story. Of course, there is the hero, there is the villain, we have the type of story, and all the things that are associated to stories. Now, detective stories are only one of film categories. Now, we did have the discussion of film categories, or there is another word that we talked about, if you can recall, that we had different genres. Now, the different genres, we can say that we have here, for example, action. We have also adventure, as we mentioned. Now, just to remind you that we have your animation and also biopics. We have comedies, we have drama, epics. We have also horror and science fiction. We have westerns and we have also war. Now, these are different genres. You were asked to choose one of these genres and apply them in your writing. Now we have here, what kind of TV films do you enjoy and why? Now, this was the beginning of the discussion, and we had the writing part, which was about to write about a movie, not the story, but how this movie was made, what is the formula, what is the genre or the subgenres that are included in the movie, and to just write about the different parts that we have here. Now you can see that we have here the word type or category. It's the same as the meaning of genre. Now this is what we had for our last part, which was the writing lesson. Now we have here, we are also asked to write an expository essay here. Now, this is the end of our enrichment. We had the basic idea. We just recalled the different phrases and expressions that we used in our units for a concerning conversation. Of course, we had the listening also lessons. We had the pronunciation. We had the pronunciation concerning pronouncing the letter R, the letter, and also we have here ED. We had consonant clusters, and also we had the lesson on how to link vowels together. Now, our listening, if you recall that we talked about Dr. Abdullah Rabi'a, we also listened to newspapers and the history of money. We also had the listening part that there was a kind of interview about different designs that was mentioned in Unit 4. Now, this is what we have here in our enrichment for the day. We are going to complete, inshallah, in our next lesson. We are going to study vocabulary, or just recall the vocabulary, revise and apply also grammatical structures that we have in the book in other exercises. So be ready.